Hi, I'm Joe Pearman, and I'm wondering how the process of writing can help us make better decisions at work. In the last video, we looked at the framing effect, the way how options are presented influences decisions. And we looked at a study of insurance professionals who you would assume to be quite objective and analytical and uninfluenced by frames, and it turned out they were just as much as anyone else's. So I concluded by wondering how writing can help us minimize the framing effect and make more objective decisions. In my experience, writing can help. In particular, when I've had to brief somebody in writing, I've sometimes gained a different perspective. For example, when you're defining a strategy for a software product, you need to take into account various factors: the changing expectations of the market, your own strengths as an organization, and any particular constraints you're operating under. But it's easy to make assumptions on the actual technology that fits the need. There's something about the process of writing whole sentences and connected paragraphs that shows up these kinds of assumptions. Not if you're just kind of pasting together bullet points that you pulled from a SWOT chart or something like that, but if you're thinking carefully through the logical flow of your writing, really constructing a narrative, that helps to show things up and really widen your point of view. And this happened to me. But by putting together an argument on the technology I thought we should use to solve a problem, I realized we had a better approach lying right under our noses. Because my colleagues and I had been immersed in the problem, we didn't notice it, but it was through the process of writing an argument that it came to light. And this has happened to me quite a few times, that in the process of writing, I've been surprised by what I actually find, and it's helped me and others think in a different way. But this is just my own experience, and it's not close to kind of experimental conditions like the study we saw in the last video. So is there research that shows that writing can help us break out of mental frames? Researchers Winston, Sieck, and Yates looked at equivalent tasks to the ones we looked at in the last video. And the difference in their study was that some of their subjects they asked to write a memo justifying the rationale for their decision. And this actually helped to reduce the framing effect. Further experiments they did used a problem with much less strict framing where the options were less obviously equivalent. And as such, it's closer to a real-life kind of work decision you'd have to make. The subjects in these experiments were undergraduate students at the University of Michigan, enrolled in an introductory psychology class. And they were asked to choose between two scholarships offered by the university in the task. As in other studies that we looked at, they were split into two groups, and each group was presented with an alternative framing of the options. The first group, presented the first frame, were told that the selection process for the scholarship had two stages. Firstly, they'd have to apply for it, and at that stage they had a 75% chance of not being selected and just a 25% chance of going through to the next stage, which was an interview. Those who made it to the interview stage would have a choice of definitely winning a $3,000 Washington scholarship or an 80% chance of winning a $4,500 Jefferson scholarship. But they had to make their choice before they knew if they got to the interview stage, so before submitting the application in the first place. So this framing has the sense of potentially losing something that you already had. And as you would expect from what we saw last time, more of the subjects picked the safe bet of the Washington scholarship for $3,000. Now the other group had a different, simpler one-stage frame, where they could just choose from a 25% chance of winning the $3,000 scholarship or a 20% chance of winning the $4,500 scholarship. The chances work out just the same as the first pair of choices, but these are framed in a more positive way. And again, as you would expect from what we saw last time, more of the subjects in this frame picked the riskier option, the smaller chance of winning more. Remember that there's no right option here, but the wording itself shouldn't really be a factor. So the subjects were swayed by the mere presentation of the options more than the underlying chances. But the twist in Sieck and Yates' study was that some of the subjects were asked to write a memo justifying their decision before they made their choice. Looking at the breakdown of results here, the group that did write the memo had less of a gap between the two frames, so it looked like more of them made a more objective choice based on the underlying chances and their true appetite for risk. So writing the rationale did actually help them. But you might say, can't I just think about my decision more before I make it? Sieck and Yates included a third group in their experiment to test just that. So this third group were asked to plan what they would write before they would make the decision, but not actually write it until afterwards. And we can see it did help a little bit, but not nearly as much as actually having to go through the process of writing down their rationale before they made their decision. And I think there's something interesting here about not just kind of outlining or bullet points, but proper writing, proper connected writing. But we'll come back to that. You might wonder, does writing actually help other kinds of decisions, less clear-cut ones perhaps? So this wasn't the only study that showed that writing reduced the framing effect, but in the paper the authors mentioned that some other studies on more emotionally involving or less analytical activities showed that thinking through your rationale could actually have a negative effect on your decisions. It could be counterproductive. So I had a look at those other studies, and they tended to be on somewhat superficial subjects, such as the choice of a strawberry jam. And in that particular one, subjects who were asked to write a rationale for their choice of jam tended to make a less objectively valid choice than that of professional food tasters. Another study was about the choice of an art poster to take home, and those who wrote their rationale for the choice regretted their choice of poster more later after they'd taken the poster home. What was common in all of those studies was that the writing process was fairly superficial. It was more of a justification for a decision rather than a real explanation. And as the researchers behind a number of those studies wrote, in most of our studies, people are asked to make off-the-cuff, fairly brief explanations of their attitudes. And it is possible that a more in-depth kind of reflection, such as that advocated by Janus and Mann in 1977, will have very different effects on the quality of people's decisions. There are quite a few more recent studies about the effect of thinking on framing. Generally speaking, if you have no kind of conceptual framework for a decision, conscious justification may actually lead you to make a worse decision, or at least one that's no better. But for typical decisions we face at work, where we have some background and some criteria for a good decision to work with, considered writing can really help. The original Sieck and Yates study still holds up well, and there have been a couple of interesting recent ones backing it up, including a study of judges in China who made more objective judgments when they wrote their reasons first. But what does considered writing really mean? What's the difference between superficial writing or mere planning and something more helpful? I'll go into that with some examples from my own experience and that of others in the next video. For now, I'd love to hear in the comments about how writing may have helped you make better decisions at work, or even where it may have got in your way. Thanks for listening.